LCEA bargaining Thursday, January 9, begin at 4 o'clock.
Hello everyone, Happy New Year. Welcome back
New Year.
to bargaining. Hope everybody had a great holiday break. Obviously, we've got a few additional people here today. As we discussed in our last meeting, as we continue to discuss the various parts of Article 10, where both groups had some proposed focus points. So much of that involves Dr. Weisskopf's world and her department that I felt necessary for her to come and discuss and kind of clear up some different points of the items that we were discussing. Might go a little out of order of what we see here on the agenda as far as the topics. The crux of what a majority of our discussion has come from has been centered around the learning walks and instructional framework. So they're prepared to discuss that. I feel like starting off with the meat, that'll probably be the meat of the discussion if you guys are okay with that.
Well, I have
What's
a
that?
couple questions before we start.
Okay. And then there's been a couple issues that have come up since just prior to the break, and that was on teacher calendar. There's a process and we go through committee, and then in the past it's been bargained and talked about with both units, and we'll talk about that and how we can move forward on dealing with the calendar. The critical shortage MOU, we talked a little bit about that. I had some of my folks pulling on different data sources for that. It's way deeper and more convoluted than what I thought when you start pulling. Okay, are you going to look at where your flood of applicants came from? Or are you just looking at postings? Are you looking at what snapshots and glimpses of the year? And combining all that has been a little bit more difficult task than what we assumed. I like what you guys suggested last time of talking to the principals. So I want to survey them, but we can discuss more about the critical shortage. I have some clarifications on some of the questions that we had around the specific positions that have remained unchanged over the last few years and where those are at. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss some of that. And then I just wanted to highlight that we do have executive session scheduled with the board on Monday evening. So that's kind of the breakdown of just the agenda. Mr. Clapp, what you got?
Okay, I'm assuming, I'm hoping one of the items on the executive session is pre-K and ESE preschool as part of the bonus program.
What we're looking at, I am going to present numbers to them on what was left and what the impact would be as far as different ways to approach the people that might have missed out on Best and Brightest. So yes, that'll be part of discussion with them, and overall from a compensation standpoint, where do we stand? So.
Okay, because I put that proposal out on compensation a while back and never gotten any official response other than we're still looking.
Mm-hmm.
So
that they're Mr. Ward and I will be talking with them in executive session about what opportunities exist for compensation in executive session. So we'll be prepared to update on compensation. Hopefully we can schedule pretty soon after the executive session.
will we have, I'll get with you, make a request on some of the latest budget figures, so we'll talk about, and again, we're still talking just 1920 contract, right? We're not going to slide into that like we did that 1 year and make it a 2-year negotiation.
Well, I can't, without a proposal to bring forward, I can't tell you exactly. I need parameters from the board once we talk to them about the economics behind how we can approach compensation from that standpoint. So I don't have a definitive answer to that. My goal as always, is hopefully I can free up some type of base compensation or some type of compensation period for instructional and all staff. So see how that goes. I can give you an update on all things compensation when we come back. So, yeah, because I think we're also, well, I'll just leave it at that. Anything else on moving forward with this evening?
No, but I would like to have a caucus before we get started.
Okay.
Office 406.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time.
Welcome back to caucus. You guys have anything before we get into the agenda?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay, well, like I said, we've got Ms. Glasscoff and many members of her team here today, and you guys had and presented some language and discussed portions of Article 10, and the two pieces that are at the center of a lot of work that they do is the instructional framework, and also the learning walks and how those classroom visitations are going. Some of the questions around the learning walks, we did some work to try and clarify those things. I felt like we came to some general consensus through conversation about some things we'd like to see improved in those areas, but then we also had some lingering questions, and my hope is some of those lingering questions can be answered through Dr. Weisskopf's presentation today. But in Section 8, on what you guys proposed in Article 10, you included the instructional framework and/or any other presented document will be used by teachers as a guide in planning and teaching course content, and teachers will be responsible for teaching required standards. So that instructional framework and any other presented document will be used by teachers as a guide is the additional language that you guys put in there. I know the framework is something that's being globally used as an expectation across the district. I understand where the blueprints and the resources that are provided in that regard have rested in language and have been referenced as a guide for teachers to use. I think from the approach of the instructional framework is more of a global expectation across the district that administrators are being held to, as well as teachers being held to, on how information that they do pull from either themselves or guides or various resources, and how some of the expected things to see in the classroom. So I'm speaking a little out of turn. If I could, just so you guys know, I don't think, or I know we're not comfortable with the instructional framework being referred to as a guide in language. I think that, I know when we looked at moving forward with this and using it throughout the district to guide our methods, I know I believe the superintendent met with you guys and showed some of that to you, and you guys had some conversations about it. And I just want to make sure that people understand, while it is a vision and it is the way we're pushing forward, it's not a threatening piece of work, and that or the instructional visits and things like that, I want to remove through discussion all of anything that might be this feeling of that these aren't tools that are being used for anything other than improving student learning and instructional practice. So if you want to share anything else on the framework, I know she's brought copies of the framework for anybody that might not be familiar.
I'm sure you are, but I'm gonna go ahead and start to talk about this once it's in front of you. So I just brought a copy of our framework. The superintendent, 3 years ago charged the division to develop a common vision for instruction, so that we could ensure that students had access to quality learning experiences, and that all kids deserve the opportunity to learn through reading, writing, thinking, and talking. And so this basically sort of is a simple framework that's very adaptable to any content area, any grade level. And so I guess I wanted to just make sure that we all had an understanding of what it was that we were looking at. And so we did a lot of work around this summer. In summer leadership, we had teacher teams that were there with Doug Fisher. It's very research-based. It comes from, it's a compilation of work from Mike Schmoker and Doug Fisher. It aligns with the Marzano's 6 elements that were chosen several years ago, and we narrowed the evaluation tool from 24 to 6. And so there is this understanding that students have an opportunity to know what they're learning, why they're learning it, and how they're going to know when they learn it. The idea that they hear from an expert voice every day in the room, that somebody models their thinking and talks about how we learn things, that there's an opportunity for them to ask questions, for teachers to be able to guide and facilitate instruction, for students to be able to talk with each other in classrooms, and for students to have some opportunity to practice what they've learned in an independent way to show that they've learned it. So I guess I think it is, while it's a framework and in the way that it's adaptable, that any of the pieces can come first, second, third, or fourth. It's not linear. It can be taught in any order. But the superintendent and our division does have a vision for instruction, and we want it to be common. If anytime she presents, one of her goals is to have a common vision for instruction. So it is an expectation for all leaders to implement this at their schools. They are being held accountable to that, and it is on their evaluation. It's one of our 6 expectations for leadership, and that they will implement this common vision for instruction, including the elements of the district instructional framework. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else. So I thought what I might do, so that leads into the discussion about the learning walk tool. So I thought it might be helpful. I don't know how many of you have seen the data that's collected. I thought that might be interesting to see how we collect it, what it looks like. IT and Dwayne have done a great job of developing a dashboard. So I will tell you, I have brought a paper copy of what, when we do learning walks, do you want me to go ahead and run there?
Yeah,
what that looks like. They do it typically electronically, but some still use paper pencil, so you may actually get more than that.
Before we move forward, I'd just like to list off the quick review of the points that we have made, so Dr. Waskoff's team is familiar also. We looked at this chunk of language that had to do with classroom, labeled classroom observations, and then it bled into learning walks, because learning walks were kind of new. Some of the work we've done is we divided that block of language into 2 paragraphs that kind of separate the 2 things on kind of parameters of how classroom observations, which that's part of another bullet, is removing those similar common language that kind of sound evaluative out of that. So classroom visits, dividing that more clearly into here are the parameters and here's the purpose. And we've also clearly defined the purpose of the learning walk as a team, made an effort to do that. And I've shared that with Dr. Waskoff and her team. We've worked on, like I said, changing some of that common language that might directly confuse and link this directly to the evaluation, the team process, and we've clearly stated this is not part of the team evaluation. You know, the instructional framework and and the learning walks are more of a working cycle that will hopefully yield positive results in the team evaluation for our instructional personnel, because they do directly correlate, however. So some of the questions we've had as a group for Dr. Weisskopf's group is, who is or who should be participating in this? Who is using the tools, and where does that information go? Who should be identified, and how are they identified, or should they be identified? And who's requesting the different mechanisms of feedback, and what kind of information should and can be shared, and as a group, hopefully we'll come to some consensus of, how do we use this for the positive aspects and goals of what we're all trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to update your group kind of on the discussion we've had thus far, so I'll be quiet.
So we made a shift because of the language change that talked about that there were no names to be on the learning walk tool. So we use it as just an evidence of trends. So if the district is charged with creating a common vision for instruction and implementing it, I don't know what system wouldn't want to monitor whether or not it's being implemented. And what's the impact on student achievement and student learning. So basically, we use the learning walk tool to gather evidence on learning trends. We talk to administrators and chime in the point that it's nice to be able to say, I went out and did 25 walkthroughs, and this is what I saw this week, and here's some things that I saw in terms of a trend across our school. It helps us to know what we should be learning more about and what we shouldn't be. And I'm going to ask Dwayne to kind of show. We use a database that's built. It's completely separate from any kind of evaluation piece. It allows us to gather data. We look at it. Regional people look at it. Your principals look at it to see sort of what's happening in the school. We look at it to see sort of how are we doing with implementation. So we can look at it by school, by region, by administrator, by subject.
High school level, grade groups.
And grade groups, so high school, middle school, elementary, to look at trends across the data. So basically what you see on the piece of paper is exactly the framework, just put in a different format to be able to provide a checklist, which then goes into the learning walk tool that's allowed to catch the data. So you'll notice that this is just a demographic page that talks about what subjects we've seen so far, how many at each school have been done. Another leadership expectation is that leaders do at least out looking at learning 10 opportunities a week. And then, so we're looking at sort of what's the collective, how much of a view do we have of what's happening in schools? So, Dwayne, if you'll go to so let's take purpose. If you were at summer leadership or have seen any work done, you know that we're heavy on the purpose side. Doug Fisher says that if kids knew what they were learning, why they were learning it, and how they would know they'd learn it, that we would make a large jump in student achievement. So we decided we were going to put that to the test. Most schools decided that was an area of focus for them this year. So you'll notice that on purpose so far this year, and we're looking at Region 1, so this is the north end of the county, that basically we know just from that, if you look, we scroll down just a tad. We've asked people doing learning walks to make sure they ask those questions. We've asked a huge sample, almost 4,662 kids what they're learning, why they're learning it, and how they know they learned it. And you can see that we're getting really good at the what. So that's a celebration for us. That's something we celebrate, that kids know what they're going to learn each day. And I know as adults, when I go into a learning opportunity, I kind of want to know what I'm going to learn each time. So that's important to me. It makes some sense. And we also know that we still are working on the why, and I think that's a perfect place to be after one semester of work. And that it's going to take us a while to get to the how. And so I think we're looking at, and we look at that district-wide, it pretty much comes out the same. And so I think that's really work to be proud of. So we celebrate things like that those are happening. You'll notice that when you look at the purpose notes or things that we scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that there's a place to put notes. And we really are looking at, when we train on this with leaders, we talk about what are students doing. We want to know what the impact is on students. So you'll notice that most of the comments or commentary are dealt with students. Students are working on this. They're in IDR. The teacher asked the whole class what we're learning and why, and 10 students were chosen. to answer what and why. Everyone was asked, we talk a lot about being non-judgmental, don't put comments in there that we don't have good information about. And so it's just a database that helps us kind of understand where we are as a school, as a region, as a level, as a district. You want to show them some other pieces of it? So you'll notice that we look at, that there's a place where we can look at the clouds, what's happening with the instructional framework as well. What we've also talked about is that we do not, we don't require that whoever is doing the learning walk is looking at everything on the sheet. If you're focused on one thing in a school, then just look at that. If you're doing a coaching cycle with a teacher and the teacher says, I want to work on only collaborative learning, like I plan for collaborative learning, you come in and watch for it, then the only thing that they would look at is collaborative learning. So this is not an all-encompassing document. It's a document to be used in pieces and parts. Whatever a teacher wants to work on or whatever the school's focused on can also be used as well. So we've talked a lot about that. So you'll see that there's graphs, students were at task on task. They talk about what what's identify and overcome common objections. Sales presentations is probably the purpose for the day, so they wrote down their purpose so they could remember that. Working with groups of students, others working independently, students working in center groups. So those are the types of comments that are written. So so again, it's very non-threatening. Just a trend data database. So the question that came up, where does the data go? This is where it goes. You know, we came 3 years ago working on reading, writing, thinking, and talking. And we're getting really good. So these are lots of things to celebrate. And one of the things that we have coming up is a board workshop to talk about where we are with some of the goals, the common vision for instruction, the reading, writing, thinking, and talking. And so I'm excited to share the data about what's happening in the district. And we know that if we didn't have a common vision for instruction, we could not offer up the idea that all of our students are getting experiences that we know are quality experiences that all students deserve. So I don't know, you guys want to chime in at all about anything? Stephanie, it looks like you might want to talk.
I do, thank you. Yeah, I could give you anecdote after anecdote about things that students have said. This makes so much more sense talking about the purpose, about why we're learning, what we're learning, why we're learning. And like you said, we're still working and getting to the how piece. I've heard comments from teachers, it makes sense to pose it this way. So talking about a standard, what are we learning in a more general sense? And I just want to add that this piece is part of an entire system. Dr. Weishaupt referenced Schmoker, Fisher, Marzano. It also includes pieces from the Opportunity List, which we're studying. And the learning walk process is part of learning that many of us have done, many of you at the table. It's through what was formerly called the Commissioner's Leadership Academy, and it's Brian Dassler Leadership Academy now. So throughout the state, this is a version that we've adapted to here in Lake County. So, you know, leaders, we have to be a public practice, right? So we have to open ourselves up to be public so that we can help and support and learn from each other. And that is the system that created that, and that's a system that we are excited to be able to do and do the very best for our kids every day here in Lake County.
I think when we talk about being a school system instead of a system of schools, thank you, Stephanie. I don't know what other profession or system wouldn't monitor what's happening in their profession. So when it comes to like knowing what's going on, it's like saying I'm not going to go to practice, but go ahead and play the game anyway. So it makes sense to if we have an expectation that we know what learning environments are best for kids and where they thrive, and we research different ways of doing that, and then we've got to, when we train people and implement, then we want to see how it's going. And so the conversation should just be a conversation about how is it going, and what should we do next, and what should we work on, what should we focus on. And that's really the crux of this work. Now, I will tell you that we train on this every month, and hopefully you're getting training from that as well. We don't have it perfect. We know that every leader doesn't have it perfect, and I'm fully able to be vulnerable and say that. Like we're still working with people on the feedback piece without having a teacher say, I want you to come in and look for it and give me specific feedback. Currently, the language says that it's a general feedback, or unless people will want to give that feedback, we give it in a general sense. And it may come in a form of a whole email. I don't know exactly how leaders, and maybe you guys can talk about how you give that feedback. But we know we're still working on it every month. We get better at what we're looking at and what each piece means. And what I know is the feedback we got from the elements on Marzano were a bit convoluted, and teachers didn't really understand what it looked like every day in every class. And this was a very simple version of what that might look like every day in every class. So what other question came up?
Part of what our discussion is centered around, currently the language talks about, before we divide it up, it talks about who's coming in and how much notice has to be given and things of that nature. So it doesn't really address who's coming into the classrooms and collecting data. So I think if we could speak to that, because what I did leaving our last session is, okay, I'm going back and looking at all the job descriptions and following my discussions with Dr. Weiskopf's team. I'm looking at all these other instructional job descriptions that they can lend to this process. And we've heard that only administrators have collected data. We've heard no, there's some coaches that have collected data. So it's kind of been all over the place. And I think it's because it's being done different ways in different places. So if you guys could speak to that a little bit, that'd be great.
So when you look at the job description, any type of instructional coach, program specialist, they all have, it is a CRT, what other, Katie, can you help with some other?
Instructional coach, anything with coach.
Any coach,
Program specialist.
they have, it is in their job description to be able to go into classrooms and observe the practice. And I guess, I go back to the idea of coaching. I mean, if I wanted a golf coach, the coach would ask me to swing first before he would tell me what to do. So I think I would want somebody to watch me a little bit before I would be offended if somebody walked in and told me how they could help me without actually watching me do my whatever it is first. So there is this part about it's part of their work, so that they can help teachers, and they're always a support system for teachers. Again, none of this work goes into, they're not evaluative, but they do have the ability to go into classrooms to support teachers, and part of that work is going in to look at practice and what's happening with student learning. They also do training, and so I don't want teachers sitting in trainings that teachers don't need. So I think teachers, these other personnel that come in and look at what's happening with practice and what's happening with student learning, create a way for us to say, hey, people are saying are needing this type of learning for the adults to be able to help with student learning. So that's, I don't know, do you have any?
Do you guys have any questions so far about anything as a whole or specific?
Sorry?
I'd just like to know, Dr. Weiskopf, when you're talking about 80% of the students could accurately tell what they were learning. And I would certainly think that is something important. But do we have any kind of statistics or looking at the next step of this? These children, these 80% of children are performing better?
I'm hoping it's coming, right? So you would hope that if it's true, if they know what they're learning, that they would be able to learn it more, right? So I hear what you're saying. We are literally in 4 months in. So I would say statistically, we don't have anything yet. But we would look at, I think one of the things I guess you could look at is our end of the year scores, and I think we'd have to ask teachers, do you do that a lot? Do you talk about purpose? And because we don't have it by teacher, the only way you have it is by school, to say if school's achievement went up. my next step is always to ask people, what do you think contributed to that? Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that we're telling kids? I don't know. So I don't know that there's always going to be a direct correlation. I don't know that I've answered your question, but currently, right now, not specifically, because we don't have data on specific kids, because we don't have anybody's name on any. I don't want kids' names on any. I mean, I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying, right now, we have a collective body that says district-wide, we were trying to work on something specifically, and out of 4,000
So
kids in Region 1,
What are
80%
we,
of those.
what are we using to measure our success then? Just the fact that that percentage is increasing?
Our success in what? Student learning, or what's happening with
Mhm.
student experiences?
Student learning. Well, I would think they would do the same. I would hope that.
I'm hoping, but eventually, I think that's would be the point, right? So, right now, what we use is any kind of data that's gathered with common assessment. So you're looking at LSAs, you're looking at EOCs, you're looking at FSAs, you're looking at, so that when you talk about student learning, that's a way, it has to be common for us to get that understanding. So we're looking at moving up student achievement through how the state measures it, the district expectations. How else would you, is this a trick question? Like, are you?
It is not at all.
Okay.
I just, we are 3 years into this vision.
Mhm.
I want to know how do we measure that success?
I think the community is going to hold us accountable when we measure it by numbers that come back from state assessments. At the end of the day, that's what it's going to be. And so I think, I'm not saying that that's a way that everything's measured, but it's a way that we will be measured, and I think we'll have to look at it then. And I do think it takes some time to get a district system to work, and we've got to give it a little bit of momentum. There are pieces of the framework district-wide that maybe aren't implemented as fully yet, but again, we're 4 months in, and I do know that many people are working on the purpose piece, and so I think I'm kind of proud of the fact that many schools said we're going to work on the what, why, and the how, and we're seeing some movement in that area.
And subjectively, I don't know the details of all, I understand the background. Is it weighted? I'm going to make a subjective yes, that my 18-year-old senior in an AP class is going to be able to answer more articulately what the purpose is than a second grader. So how do you weight that?
Well, I don't know that we are, we would pull it by, like, elementary, we'd have to kind of, I don't know if we were weighting it. You know,
Okay.
I don't know that we're.
And that's fair.
I think you'd be surprised.
Is my subjectivity?
Kindergartners can do it.
I didn't say they couldn't, but the question is, how will that skew some of the information? Like, for example, you may come away with a base in elementary, middle school, and high school, and they're going to be different. And that, I think, is something, one of my pets is we're all different. And, you know, try not to fit us all in one jar. That was just what driving that question. Let me go to what I'm really thinking. First off, a compliment. I am just speaking for one teacher myself in high school. I like the instructional framework. I appreciate the work that's gone into it and such. We have it in posters in our classroom. Where we talked last time in regard to the contract, and that's what I'm talking about in regard to my members. We tried to get language to manage disruption. I am sure that a lot of the kind people that come in, whether we call it a observation, a learning walk, et cetera, again, just a subjective statement, the younger the student, the more disruption it is for the teacher, because it disrupts the whole that they have to get on the day. So my first question is, what is the difference between a learning walk and an instructional review?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if you guys want to speak to instructional reviews?
I want to dovetail a little bit on
Sure.
on that, because I noticed during, Emily, your presentation, you used the phrase walkthroughs and learning walks somewhat interchangeable.
I do.
But
you're
those are
correct.
two entirely different things. So
There's
it's
a
no
walkthrough
wonder our
as well.
administrators and teachers confuse the purpose of each.
And let's be fair, when we get confused too, and we're as close to it as we can be, I can't tell you the confusion, and you said it yourself, as far as the execution out there, which is what is prompting a lot of this conversation. And let you get back to polling. What is a learning walk, which is in my contract? What is an instructional review?
So, I feel like I have lots of people here to talk about it, but I'm
Sure.
going to go on.
I had one
I can
yesterday,
answer.
Stephanie, so what is an instructional review?
Well, and I'm glad you're asking, because I think I speak for all of us, we want it to be very clear, right? We don't want any surprises, so.
Absolutely.
Great question. So a learning walk is, well, I'm gonna answer from what I do from my standpoint, okay? Let me approach it that way, because school-based might have a different answer, a principal might answer it a different way, but they do learning walks also. So a learning walk is where I would go in with my team, with the school team together. We usually, I'll pair up with a principal and people will pair off and go in and visit classrooms, and we'll look for, just things, whatever the school happens to be working on. And in most cases, especially in my region, it's purpose. So we'll monitor that, look for that, and look for evidence of that. And when I say that, I say that we follow the tool. It's non-judgmental. We leave notes of affirmation, what we saw, what we heard when we're in the classroom, because we want it to be a welcoming experience. We appreciate the work that everyone's doing for our kids. So that is a learning walk. That's a smaller, so we might visit 3 classrooms, and we might come back and put the lesson together into 3 segments. You understand what I mean? So
I do.
it's on beginning, middle, and end.
And that, they're using the tool, and the tool gets processed into the database. I'm clear on that.
Yes. An instructional review is a bigger, look, if that would be the right word, and that's 3 times a year. So a beginning, a middle, and end of year instructional review. And that is, for example, that we don't visit the same classrooms. We'll fan out and visit 20 different classrooms, for example. And also using the tool and just looking at trends across the school. Again, no individual information is collected, but what we want to see is, okay, so there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. What's working? What can we celebrate? What's there that we need to maybe provide some more learning around and help and support teachers and students learn and grow in those areas.
So what you said was the instructional review is a bigger approach, or a bigger task than the learning walk.
We visit more classrooms.
So that's why yesterday I had 29 guests at our Lake Mineola High School.
29 guests.
Well, that's what we were told was coming, so I may be wrong.
That was, well, part of the people there were Leadership Lake, they did not visit classrooms. There was just a group of community members that had breakfast in the
Okay.
library.
But there's a
and did
group that
little tour.
comes in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many times a year do you guys do learning walks?
It varies.
If I'm at a school, I always ask a principal to take me to some classrooms.
Mhm.
So we're doing learning walks. And I don't
Okay.
record it, but they could. It
Mhm.
counts as some of their 10, so.
Okay, so now as an attempt to dimensionalize this for you,
Go ahead.
okay. I'm hearing, well, we obviously have our formal and informal, and there are issues always associated with that. We've negotiated the learning walks because there were very much issues with that and a lot of concern, and I think we worked very well together last year, eliminating the name, stuff like that. Now, in addition to that, we've got instructional reviews 3 times a year. And again, if you're coming into the AP government class with very responsible young people, I welcome you because I want you to see the good work we're all doing. But elementary school is a totally different thing, and that's what we're hearing back. And add one complexity to which you already know. Your administrators and your coaches are as confused to the process as sometimes we get in the table just talking about it. And so we wind up with emails from administrators. Are we denying that an administrator can't talk to a teacher about a subject? No, of course not. That's what evaluations are for. That's what we all agreed to. But there could be emails that go on for pages that are coming out of maybe a learning walk, maybe an instructional review, maybe a, and there are, as we talked about, it needs to be addressed, there are coaches who may have something in their job description, you know, about this, and yes, I would prefer them to come in before they, you know, talk to me too. But I probably wouldn't if I was teaching second grade. I probably want to invite them, the way it works at my school, where I say, this could be better, or I could be improved here, I'm gonna go tap into that resource. As opposed to where it might be somebody feeling that, in the corporate world, we used to call it the hatchet man. Somebody is sending the person around to collect the information and such. Again, not a perfect world we live in, and it's never gonna be a perfect system, but this is where the request and the discussion for firming up the language comes from. I think in principle, we're pretty close in the sense that there is a team evaluation, and that's what we get evaluated in. And everything else, that's where the issues kind of bump up against each other.
And even Ms. Majewski talked about the school teams may be doing it differently from the county teams. So there we've got two different purposes going on. We've got two different systems of feedback. And I'm looking at the Learning Walk tool, and I'm going back, because I'm old enough, I remember our original old iPass evaluations, which looks very similar to this. And so the tool itself looks quasi-evaluative in that you're rating each of the areas. Then we're giving feedback to the teacher, even though we're not supposed to, but somehow teachers are getting pages of, during your learning walk, I noticed X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. And then even among the discussion here, the confusion of language, which have different purposes specifically. So,
If I could just clarify, Mr. Klatt, the purpose is not different. Actually, because of the framework, it is the same. So these
but
are
you
the
said
same
in the
things.
implementation it was different.
When I was a principal, sometimes I might walk on my own, sometimes I might take my team. That's what I mean by that. Just, you know, of course, building principals have autonomy in how they visit classrooms, so that their process might be different.
And
That's okay.
Yeah, and I think what, I guess I'm getting, so I hear you, but there's two messages coming from that table too. So then you're talking about the fact that you don't want everybody in one box. So this idea that everything has to be consistent and the same is difficult when we want schools to have their own culture, their own way of doing things. There are schools that teachers say, we want feedback. They don't put their name on the learning walk, but they want the feedback. So, okay. And like you said, we're not trying to prevent people from getting feedback on what is seen in their classroom. So, but we also want to be protective of people who are fearful of their name being on some document that goes somewhere else. So I hear you. But I do think that, you know, you're asking, I don't think you want 100% the exact same lockstep how it's going to be, because I don't want to tell principals you have to do the whole thing, or you can't do a piece of it. I mean, if somebody wants to work on something, we talk about doing coaching cycles with people, even principals doing coaching cycles with people, with teachers. I want them to be able to say, I want to work more on this, help me do this, and that's part of our role as instructional leaders. And so I don't know that you want it to be exactly the same in the whole piece, and maybe I'm wrong, but I've got three leaders at the table too. So.
Well, when I hear what you're saying, but you know, it isn't a cake and eat it too situation. Evaluation is the hard word. Team is the same.
Yes.
Whether I'm a elementary school teacher or another, I know how we're going to be evaluated. We all have respective issues to that. You know, I often hear about how Lake Mineola got away with allocating and stuff like that, but neither here nor there. But the reality is that can be, you know, across the board. It's the actual classroom that I think you're sensitive to too, you know, the role in the classroom. And the younger you get, the more of an issue it has become. And then the proper rollout, communication, execution You know, because again, this is not a point finger thing, but you got assistant principals out there calling everything a learning walk. When they come in 10 times during the week to the respective people, you know, and teachers talk to each other. So obviously the assistant principal, unless he has an issue or she has an issue, is not going in the same classroom 10 times. But an assistant principal at my school has social studies and math. So they're going to be, for 10 times, they're going to be hitting a lot, and teachers talk to each other. What's going on?
But teachers are worried too, because most of our teachers now are annual contracts. And the more people that come in to look at what's going on, they're all worried that they're not going to have jobs. You know, and whether you're doing it with the best interest to look for trends and all, these teachers are worried that they're not going to have jobs.
And I'm going to take it down a road that I don't think we should go into because none of us can fix it. Morale is very low right now, has been for a while. The state does not take care of its teachers. We moved from tenure to annual contract. People feel insecure in their job. People feel the most simplest of things. I'm pretty confident. I will tell you, as probably, I don't know this for a fact, but probably as the person with the lowest pass rate in AP government, I also teach the most kids. But with the percentage-wise is the lowest pass rate, I honestly feel the beginning of the year felt like a little bit of a witch hunt. You know, what are we going to, and you know, I'm sure it bubbled up to you my concerns about the AP collaboration meetings, which have changed and have improved because I think we can work together. But it can get a little freaky. It can even affect a person like me and say, is this it? Is this the end? Should I get the resume all buttoned up? And a lot of our best have left. But again, I apologize. I took us down that road in the sense of painting a broader picture. I'm bringing us up because it isn't the district that put us in that position, it's the state.
But we have to
We live in
find
it.
ways to deal with that. And that is a reasonable problem.
Yeah.
And that is a separate problem than
We recognized this before you guys even got here. A few years ago, we said, okay, if an annual contract teacher hits highly effective, we're going to boop, 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 boop. A few other people in other districts realized the same thing, and so the legislature went ahead and changed the law so we couldn't do that. So,
I would love to have some more information on, one of the things that I think we were really, really super intentional about is the 6 elements on team and what those 6 that we chose. I think when you look at those 6, those are quality pieces of instructional practices that help students, again, learn. And so every piece of anything else that we do should help teachers perform well on team because they're all aligned. Like I guess I would understand not wanting somebody to come in my room if I was doing something different. I mean, one of the things that I was crystal clear about with anybody in teaching, learning, and leadership is you cannot have any other walkthrough tool. Because when I got here, there were 20 walkthrough tools. You were doing this program, you had this walkthrough tool. You were doing that program, you had that walkthrough tool. And there's none of, this is it. The only thing that we can look at is what's happening with student learning with these particular practices that
Is this a
align to the
walkthrough
team.
tool or a learning walk?
I'm sorry, it's a learning walk tool.
See,
Well,
there we
no.
go, 2 different
You're right.
concepts.
I do use, and I forget
Yeah.
that, and honestly, I don't do team evaluations, so you're right. I apologize. I'll have to work on it. So I consider those are different because I know walkthrough is in your evaluation language.
And they can only be rated
and also it
innovative or
is-
applied.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's also section 14 of Article 10. So what we're doing here positively is we're all trying to come to the language that will become the new section 14 that we both can agree to and take out to the rank and file. We owe you some more feedback. That's one of the reasons we wanted to have a little caucus ahead of time. We owe you some numbers, no question about it, and some direction, and we're going to work on that. But you know, that's where we're headed. It's as logical as it all sounds sitting here to the teacher, the younger the students, the more it has become a disruption. And if it's being abused or used incorrectly, it is really causing them stress and a lot of them feeling they can't get their job. And I make sure I'm not a lot, you know.
You're on a roll, I'm correct.
I don't want to exaggerate. I really don't.
So with that, of course, you know, we always say, we can't do anything about something we don't know about. Actually, I've not gotten any I mean, typically, some of those things come up. Stuart, you email us and say, hey, I've got an issue at this. That has not come to me at all about early learning in classrooms that it feels more disruptive.
Okay?
So again,
We owe you.
I can't do anything about something I don't know about.
Right.
And so, I can't coach the regional, executive directors, they can't coach principals on that, you know?
Well, let me ask it this way, before we even get to
Just-
coaching.
well, let me,
Sure.
I mean, just looking at your numbers. Each administrator has to do 10 learning walks a week. Then you've got the county people, then the regional people, then you've got the walkthroughs. As a teacher, I'm being interrupted almost every other day.
Now, those count. I mean, anytime I walk with a leader, that leader is logging that as their 10. We're not asking them to do 15 if I walk 5 rooms.
But
That'd be inaccurate.
but they're asking each of their APs to do 10 more. And then the APs are telling the coaches and
But going back to the earlier point, we do have grade levels. So APs do typically have, even at elementary, do have grade levels that they do. Middle and high do take care of departments. So it isn't one doing the entire school, traditionally.
The question I was asking, please, this is not a gotcha question. Before we even get to coaching, does it exist in a document? Glossary, information, this is what this is and this is how it does. This is what this is and this is how it does. If I became an assistant principal tomorrow, or better yet, we work with Linda Connor on the mentoring, right? Thank you. I don't have my MBA. We put together the book. And this is how, and I'm sorry, that is the thing that blows the first teachers out of their minds and panic. How do I get it into Skyward? How do I do this? How do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
They don't always use the book. The book is the Linus's blanket, but does it exist anywhere where a relatively august body could look at it and say, okay, now we understand what each of these things are and how they're supposed to do and whether or not there's a tool.
and what the purpose is and
Yeah.
who can do it.
And I think if that exists, or if it could exist, I think we could work it into the contract language. Am I looking for, please, Chris, you know I'm not shy, tell me. Tell me, especially because you're elementary.
Well, I have been guided. I think that I don't see the effect on elementary as much as you're indicating. Whether I'm visiting another school or it's people visiting my school, our kids are actually pretty comfortable with the in and out because we are not interrupting. You have a key to unlock the door, you just walk around the room, it's not interrupting the teacher. So in that regard, regarding elementary, I'm not sure if you're asking them to make a glossary of terms.
No, I'm asking the process. Read what it is, you know, it should be I should be able to reflect here, so when I've got a member coming back to me and saying, what is this? Why did this happen? I should be able to say, well, to be honest, we negotiated this, and Article 10, Section 14, here's what we can do. Is that what they did? Yes or no? Yes, I'm sorry. No, hey guys, can you look into this for us?
Well, I think we have had that internal conversations and these conversations as to what is the ultimate goal. I took this as the ultimate goal is to understand your product, understand what we have achieved or not achieved, and have things that, you know, like the instructional framework, we got to know where to grow, we have to know where we need to improve or where we're doing great. I saw it differently than the evaluative that others have seen.
And your school has seen it differently.
I would say a lot of the schools that I deal with would see it somewhat differently. But I think maybe it's, and that's where I think we've talked about clarifying what was the learning walk. It was not supposed to have names, it was not supposed to have student information, but it was used for whether it's the grade level or school-wide, to say, here's where we need to focus, or here's where we're doing a great job. That's how I saw the language.
And I'm with you on the language and where we've gone. I'm just, I think, asking for the next step, which is to codify it.
Okay. Do you have anything else you need to add?
I guess I'm not sure what codifying means.
Sure.
What, I mean, I don't know what you want in a document.
No problem.
I can't say
Observation.
if teacher A does this, then do this. If they make
No,
this, then do this.
no, I'm not looking for that kind of
Yeah.
generality. I'm looking for, well, to be honest and not be facetious, you kind of have our first go at it, right? We gave that one, and then you came back. So what we're looking for in a language is reflected in what we submitted. What I'm talking about codification is Section 14, observations of teachers' class by persons other than district and school administrative supervisory personnel and authorized personnel may occur only after the consent has been granted by the building administrator and after conferring 24 hours notice. Teams no more than 4 conduct the classroom. The learning walk used for the classroom visits will include the teachers, will not include the teacher's name, and will only be used to provide grade level and district assistance. Section 14A, the instructional review, happens 3 times a year, and blah, 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 blah. And I think us reacting back to that saying, you know, maybe one of the conversations, making this up, 3, and we have 2 because of our disruptions when we give you numbers. You know, because again, you've got, I'm not seeing it like I am, and you're getting, we've got documentation, you know, saying, oh my God, they're after me. So, you see what I'm saying there? Did I make it clearer? Yeah, that's what ultimately I think we're trying to get to. Language in the contract.
Defining.
Defining it, yeah, defining it, agreeing to it, and putting language in the contract. We know as hell, but probably not going to get any money out of you guys.
Is there any kind of
Sure we do.
information you want from us, as in our membership?
I don't know that I came prepared for an ask, you know what I mean? 'Cause I think I was asked to just come talk about, show you where information goes, and so I had kind of a, so I don't.
And we appreciate that, I appreciate
I
that.
might need some time to think. I don't know that I haven't asked in terms of, I don't know if anybody else had any information that.
I just, as I sat here and thought, okay, we're, things that we want, is there something you want?
I think one question I need to answer just at the beginning is, I think we've established that we've got people coming in and collecting data outside of administrators. If we're recognizing that, okay, it's not evaluative, there's some misunderstandings with common language that we can shore up. I'm very confident in that. While we can nitpick and say, well, you said that word, I think we're all pretty bright. I feel like, do you guys feel like it's okay if we have instructional people collecting information if it's non-evaluative using these tools?
Instructional people that are not coaches or not assistant principals.
Well, I mean, well, your instructional coaches and your people that are those list of instructional personnel that aren't necessarily just a classroom teacher with students assigned to them. The people that are basically their charge in life is to go in and support teachers. And a lot of that, you know, you've got some words interlaced in there that point to this type of activity.
But isn't there a difference between somebody that supports a teacher and somebody who is the direct administrator, evaluator of that teacher?
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So I'm getting that you're trying to put them all in the same place to do this.
And then you're getting me wrong, because that's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is your AP and your assigned administrator and your principal and your building administrators, they're doing your evaluative team process.
And learning loss. They're doing learning loss.
But they have.
We'll
to
get there.
evaluate.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, that's that purpose, and that's happening, and it yields results that are trending favorable. So, but on the other hand, on the other side, we've got a big group of people, of educators that are trying to work together, collect information to recognize trends, to improve student learning, to improve teacher practice in an altruistic, pure way that has nothing to do with what we've been obligated to do from the state.
And I know when I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I know when Hillsborough had their teacher mentors, they worked with teachers outside of any evaluating technique or any evaluation. They wanted to develop a relationship, a trusting relationship between the coach/mentor and the teacher, so it could be collaborative. So if we're on the one hand asking that coach, mentor, individual to collect data, which could then go into quasi-evaluation, it's breaking down that collaborative trust relationship. I'm not going to ask for help with somebody if I know what I'm asking for is going to be used against me later on.
But how?
It can be, because it goes into a whole different system. It's not quasi-evaluative, it's non-evaluative.
And how, and I guess
But
how is this
I
being
agree
used
with
in a punitive fashion? Do you, because that's something I haven't heard from you guys. I've heard theoretically it's possible, which anything's possible.
Well,
But, I mean, they might not like the color of your hair, but if it's not evaluative, then it's separate from that process. But man, it's got some really good elements that are gonna help build them towards being successful over here. But, and we do keep it separate, but I haven't seen any results of this being punitive. I mean, like you're saying with the people being on annual contract, you're right, we can't control it. However, they have more opportunities and time to shine and gain support and be supported in what they're possibly not doing well in this process. So that can work both ways also. So I guess I think the more robust the team is that works in the learning walk world, I feel like it lends to more success. But I do want to remove any perception of quasi-evaluative out of that. So what parts of the process do you feel like are quasi-evaluative that have got a hitch?
Which is one reason why the document that was presented was taking out some of that, because some of the issues that we are hearing from teachers is, now whether it's happening or not, of course we have no idea, but a coach, specialist, whomever, they walk into my classroom and they have this tool right in front of them and they're using this tool, right? Their perception is that this is going to go back to my administrator, and my administrator then is going to look at this, and then they're going to say, okay, well, what are they doing wrong? What are they doing? And then it goes from there because they're using this. Okay? So,
Whose perception?
the teacher.
The coaches or the teachers?
teachers. The teachers are thinking then that they're going back. So some of the information then from those coaches, specialists, CRTs, whomever, then they're seeing this and they're not using it just as trends.
No.
They're using it then to go back. And again, certain schools, certain things, I'm sure it's not everybody, but again, they see this and they wonder, is this part of my evaluation? Because then the next day, the next 2 days, in walks in the administrator and they're looking at the same thing. And all of a sudden, it comes up that, oh, well, why did you do X, Y, Z? And that's what was just spoke about in the coach. And see what I'm saying? I mean, it's not like it's...
And you're a literacy coach, right?
Yeah.
So can I ask a question? So how would your work be different? Because I think that, can't I think of I hear you. How would your work be different if would it change your work at all with what you do with teachers by using the tool or not using the tool?
Well, I know that personally, if I am just going into a classroom, I don't have the tool with me. I know what's on the tool. I know what our instructional framework is. But I can't necessarily see trends and see where I need to focus my effort without data. I mean, we collected an iReady for students. We do a lot of data. That's some of my coaches' data. I come from a school, and there's several that I know of my peers. They don't ask me to come into their classroom. They don't want me in their classroom. I have to just show up because I have a different type of teacher. So without collecting data and looking at trends and having it available, it does make developing my PD for my school or giving individualized instruction to teachers difficult.
Liz, what do you say?
Now, I think for me, I don't take the tool in, but I like to have the conversation with the teachers, and I think for the most part, I have a good contact with most. And what do they want to work on? So that's where I kind of start from. However, when they're doing learning walks and that kind of thing, and they find trends, when we get together as a leadership, we look at PD, PLCs that would fill in that hole. Now, the only time I work with someone who really doesn't want me in their room, and I push in anyway, and I try to do it delicately, is usually the administrator had seen an issue. And so I go in. And sometimes I'll go in and it'll be, I will teach your class, and why don't you go see so-and-so on a particular thing? Or how would you like me to model this for you? Or let's co-teach this together, or whatever the case may be. But I think it all goes back to relationships. And I think that data is great, but I really think the best coaching is when I'm asking the teachers, what is it that I need to be in here? I need to help you. What part of your practice can I help you with? But then on the same token, it's up to me to make sure that it's genuine, that I'm helping, and that whatever conversation we're having, the intent is for me to help them. That's my role, is to help them. And it is not to go to the administrator and give her a full report. I might, if the administrator asks me, Dr. Boone, we're working on such and such. And it ends right there. It's no more conversation. They know what we're working on. And for the most part, I think it's a building of a trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have the trust with me, they don't want me in the room, and they're not going to let me know what their Achilles heel is, and it doesn't really make a difference what that data is. But that data helps with the school as a whole, so we're not wasting precious time with
I will
PLCs
clarify,
per
they're not
se.
asking me in the room just because they hate me. I'm putting that out there.
But I mean, nobody wants to know what they, what they're
Schools that have
for.
different
I mean,
types of
or what
teachers,
they're-
different levels.
But I think the issue though is the common language is what's real important. But the other thing is truly the intent. And I can have whatever intent I want, but if I violate that trust, just as if a teacher violates the student's trust, there's going to be some conflict.
But you said three little letters that makes it all very clear to me. At least for me, I see a path out of this, which is, yes, we need to clarify. You asked a question. Do we agree that data should be collected? As a former corporate person, of course. To Emily's point, you don't have, how could you not track what's going on so you can make adjustments, et cetera, et cetera. The issue is disruption and the fear of evaluation or fear of reprisal. We won't get into all the personalities. But it sounds like people who do their job correctly float the information not to the teacher, but through the PLC or the IDP. When it's a group of teachers, when we're together, and this is what the math department, this is what the trends are showing us, and this is what we as math teachers can do. You see what I'm saying there? And then all of a sudden, we're part of the information flow as well. The information is beneficial to us, and we're getting the feedback, but no one feels like they are being evaluated.
And it also
Well,
goes
I'm
into
gonna
building,
Let me add some to that evaluation. And I shared with Chad, I've shared with other people. Emails from principals or administrators that start off, when we did our walkthroughs with administrative and district staff, we noticed you are not doing A, B, C, and D. And then sending it off to the people who are doing the evaluations for that teacher. That is kind of counterproductive.
Going back to when I asked Codify, Emily, that kind of workflow is what I'm talking about. It's like this, and then it comes out here or something there, no evaluative. We could fit something like that in the contract, and you could roll something like that and train the respective parties that that's how it works. I'd also might benefit you guys because I know from talking to the rank and file, there's a lot of, it's inconsistent. PLCs and IDPs are inconsistent, and I think they're valuable. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. We had an issue last year or 2 years ago because principals were trying to cheap out on it or deal with their small budgets by having other teachers cover, as opposed to what my principal does and hires a sub for the day, so that we've got, you know, the people totally free and no one else is grumbling about having to cover more than once a week or anything like that. So something like that, you know, might help see more consistency with that strategy.
Could I ask one thing, because I don't want to lose you while you're here? I'm looking at your data. Okay, first of all, I'm a retired teacher from a whole different county. So I'm here as a community member. I look at the data and I'm seeing, of course, you have more of a percent that knows what, because that's a lower level question. Okay?
Absolutely.
As I'm watching this data, I'm wondering, are you expecting that how to actually get up to the whats? Because I don't see, I taught the elementary level, I ended up middle school, and I taught GED. I do not see my elementary students ever really getting that how down pat, unless I gave them a specific, guess what, I want you all to know that this is how, and I have to, it would be something they regurgitated, it wouldn't be something that, so I'm looking at your data, and that's my question, are you expecting those to even out?
I'm expecting them to definitely go up. I don't know that they'll ever get to the exact same point, but they should. I mean, there's some new thinking and some new research that says that if if kids understand what they're learning and why they're learning it, the what is not all that it takes for kids to achieve. They have to actually know why is this important to me?
I get the what and the why, the
and
how.
then the idea is how do I demonstrate that to you? And it goes back to, I think, there's learning, that we've done learning scales that have some of that work in it. It just makes more sense to kids when you say, we'll know that we got this when we can be able to do this on paper, or you can articulate this. And to young kids, it makes some sense, and to students of all
Okay, you have
ages.
it all in one big clump. Do you have that data somewhere where you have spread it out to show that 80%, so many are high school, so many are middle, so many?
I do. The grade group, if you look at the grade, there's a top line where it talks about grade grouping, so I can actually divide it out into elementary, middle, and high.
And I can speak to that because I'm an elementary principal and I've had students who can tell me. It doesn't happen often with the how, but there are students who have been able to express what they're
I
learning,
just hope it's
why
not a
and how.
regurgitated answer.
And
No,
is there
he didn't know I was going to ask.
And is there a correlation between the higher percentages and school grade?
So there's a correlation between higher percentages and student achievement, yes. So Now, I'm not gonna say school grade, because we haven't done it here but for 4 months, so I cannot, I would like to test that when we have our own grades and our own achievement that comes out. I wanna be able to put this to the test, to say, all right, is what's being said in research, what does Hattie say, what does Doug Fisher say, well, is it gonna work, is it working in Lake County? And you were at summer leadership, so many of you here were on the leaders were, and so we all saw that, and which is one of the reasons why we're working on it. We agreed, let's look at this. And so it makes some sense that if I'm sitting in a training and you're teaching me something, for me to know what it is you want me to know and why I need to know this for my own work and my own practice and my own betterment. And then what do you need from me to show you that I learned it? It makes some sense. I mean, it's kind of, so,
Right. I'm just
yes, we
saying
can
that there's
disaggregate it
definitely
all
a
different ways.
disparity as
Oh,
far as the
100%.
level of the.
So, so to reiterate then, you're saying that you've only been using this data information for 4 months? Because we've been doing, you have been doing the learning walks for a while. But this is the only time now that you actually have the data that you can go back to say.
This framework is new this year.
So, and that
Is what
is
this says.
that
This is just this electronic data compilation. So, and we've only talked about it in this language since we started school this year. We trained on it at summer leadership, which is in June. Now, we've talked about this. It's not that we haven't been working on the same type of language. We have not had this framework until this year. So we don't have a whole lot of statistical data to bring back. We don't have a whole year's worth of look yet. We've got 4 more. Anything else? Anybody else wants to add? Yes, ma'am. Katie?
I know Dr. Weisskopf came to speak and answer the questions, but one thing that she really did deliberately was to show you the learning walk data in relationship to the tools. So I hope that is affirming and that it validates that the way that this information was intended to be collected and utilized is how it is being collected and utilized. It's looking at all of our learning, not a specific person's learning, but all of our learning. And we're held just as accountable for how we are learning and doing those things as an organization. So we don't have conversations about individual teachers. We have conversations about how we can perform with regard to our leadership with departments and ensuring that we are all on the same page with an understanding as a learning organization whether or not we're achieving that goal. I have been here for a while, and I know for a fact that we've had barriers around everyone measuring different things. And we have also had walkthroughs, or what they're called learning walks now, where people are in classrooms for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes to give feedback or collect data or to provide support. That's nothing new. What I do think is new is that there is an intentional focus around keeping that down to one page and one thing. So I think teachers should understand that there really has been a common effort and a rallying around this from that administration, that it's not as overwhelming as it was in the past. You see deliberate efforts and the data is absolutely shared. As far as the instructional reviews, 3 days, 10 minutes, 3 days of the year out of 180 days is not a huge ask to say, can we collectively look as a group at how we're doing? I like working for a learning organization, and I like that we hold ourselves to a high standard around, is the thing that we're working on the thing that we're getting better at. So I hope teachers would feel the same, that it's really about learning and not about a gotcha or evaluation. I think we can help by saying, I saw this, I didn't see names, I heard that, and I see that's what it is. And I think we can still work together on how to make it better, but this is the best I've seen since I've been here, and the most aligned around a common vision for instruction. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, and to add on to that, I think the support we're giving to the learning of teachers and the professional learning and aligning it to the instructional framework, so everything is one goal, and making sure that we aren't sending multiple messages and teachers don't know what to do then. They get back and they're frustrated because one training says one thing and another says another. It is all aligned so that the support that they're getting is one voice as well.
Do you guys have any other questions for Dr. Weisskopf and her team?
Thank you for the invite, letting us take a look at this together. And
We appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you for your time.
I feel like now we can move forward as a collaborative bargaining team on both sides, with everybody informed, at least from you guys' perspective. And like Ben has said, you know, they still want to collect some more information also. But I appreciate Ben drawing us back to language, you know. So I think we have some input now. We can work together and move forward. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
can we,
Absolutely.
Yeah, can we go?
Thank you.
It is getting late in the hour, and I think it's important that we try to schedule a date as quick as we can after executive session. But we do have this calendar issue that's still hanging out there, and we've got folks that would love to get that shored up so we can get it on the agenda and get it board approved. I've got some information I can pass around to you guys that compare the 196 and the student calendar. There's only a few nuances here that really differ between the two. I feel like that decisions, from what I can tell, there's not a real clear track record of how this has been done in the past. It had been bargained with SEIU. It had been representation on the calendar committee was good enough with input, and then we worked collaboratively through my office with you guys. So it's been done a variety of ways, and I've only got a 3-year base and what I can find in the filing cabinet to base things off of. But Mr. Clapp was nice enough. He showed me a memo of where LCEA communicated some agreement. I went back and pulled board agendas, and I went back and looked for signed agreements, couldn't find any of it. So, I'm perfectly fine with sitting down. This year, I will tell you, the SEIU calendar doesn't impact what happens in between this and this particular year, which is good. Those calendars are on the agenda for Monday. What I did gather during our discussion in the committee from parts of you guys' representation is that they're pretty adamant about not wanting the first professional development day during pre-planning and leaving that time free. I tend to agree with that because we got kind of everybody on board for the most part by that September date. And I feel like that respects teachers' time and it gives us more bang for the buck.
well, I'm going to tell you just from the feedback we get, like when we do the PD day at the beginning of the year, just in the sessions I did alone, every teacher wrote, I wish this wasn't the first week of school, I wish this was later in the year, I wish we could do something.
Yeah.
I got that too, because I had a thing I did.
And when Amy was talking about the alignment with training and stuff like that, I sat on my thumbs as far as the quality
It's
of
too
it.
much that teachers need to do it the first week and having that is just.
So you guys expressed that during committee, so that's where that came from this draft. And then
I can assure you teachers will appreciate that.
and then that January 4th date, it's kind of nice with that being there before the students come back. Those are a couple things that stand out. Did you guys have other concerns on how this laid next to the student calendar?
I can give feedback about having the development day when we came back. It was really positively received at our place.
Okay,
Yeah, starting back with the PD day.
okay.
Yeah.
Exact, literally.
I know there were several South Lake County elementary schools that did things very similar in some of their development.
We got that 5-hour stupid mental health thing out of the way.
So I was very glad that this, even just the calendar in itself of the world was not as wonky as last year's, because it was all kind of goofy. So what I'd like to commit to, and something Mr. Class requested, is meeting on this earlier. I'll own that, should have met on this earlier. So what I would like to express to you guys and put on record is that as soon as we receive assessment calendars from the state on an annual basis, that will come together to establish calendar committee and move forward.
Good.
That's something I did not mean to veer from, but it was weird coming in at first. It was like we're doing 2 years at once, and then we're like, no, they're changing too much to do that, and so that's the way I'd like to practice moving forward. So one thing that you had expressed, Mr. Clout, was having a note of pending ratification. I don't think that's a good idea, just because that makes it seem like it's still up in the air to our teachers. If we could sign off on it, I think annually we've signed off on it and come to agreement, almost like a review, so it can be board approved, put in stone. Are you okay as long as we sign off on it and we bring it to the table at least for discussion?
Yes.
Would you prefer that it be joint for next year with SEIU
Yes.
following the committee meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll relay that to SEIU also.
And I also, just generally, for the whole pre-planning, because we know what's going to happen is PD's going to schedule, we have to do required training this day, that day. We're rolling out something new over here for Google, whatever, so we have to do training. If we can try to keep those trainings to a minimum during pre-planning, to give teachers a chance to get their classrooms ready without having to come in on the weekends or stay late. If we can use that truly for pre-planning, getting ready for students.
And I think that was one of the things that we had discussed in the language, because in the language it talks about that on work days, principals can only have like, and schedule like half-day things, whatever, but it's actually, it only says work days versus, so if it would say like a non-student day or something,
Right.
So then they realize that I can only have a half day of something, whatever it may be.
So as far as that being a language proposal on those days, that's something we'll definitely look at. But I mean, as far as a calendar, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you know, some of this stuff's unavoidable. Bloodborne pathogens and all the stuff they
Oh,
keep
yeah.
on. As you know, starting Monday, who knows what's they're gonna come up with next. So I do think we have to have those days, both instructional and non-instructional bargaining unit, because who knows what they're gonna throw at us. Yeah.
But if we can limit that kind of stuff to half the day and give teacher half the day.
I would say the only concern I have is just using Vin. So I'm gonna have to take half of his days to finish that 5-hour training.
Right.
If they're on the professional development day, not the teacher work day, then we can knock those things out so they don't have to do it on their time.
Yeah,
So that would
I'm
be
just talking
caution.
about pre-planning primarily.
Okay, I just thought Kathy was talking in general.
Well, in general, because it already says a half day for work day. Now, I realize that was a professional development.
Right, that's what I
day.
would.
That's an all-day thing, that's a professional
I thought you were
development.
suggesting changing that, so I
No,
misunderstood that.
no.
So
I'm talking
look at
about
the
like a
language you
work
guys
day
talk
and-
about through the lens of preserving as much pre-planning
Right.
as possible.
Correct, and that's why we said like, don't have the PD day, don't have any of those type of things, so that teachers can have.
They're supposed to only be in there half the day, but people want to get it over with. Yeah, so that's the hard thing. Trying to figure
Yeah,
out
no,
where you're
PD
gonna
day
get
is a
that
PD
stuff
day and you're, it's, whatever day it is, it's.
So-
That's right, just the non-student day part, because then that would cover the PD day.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like the draft calendar you're okay with?
You all happy with it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I can sign an MOU.
Okay, well, we'll prepare that
Can
for
I
you.
just
and
make a
have it for you
comment on
tomorrow.
this? We have
Absolutely.
to come back for one day.
I know.
I know, it's like,
Well, and
most of them don't.
I,
Really?
yeah, they do. And that, trust me, I thought the same thing. And it's, I think you got some that will, and then what I would express is that the buildings have flexibility on how they manage that last day, and I think superintendent would be in favor of, them managing
Work
Well,
day,
there's some
post
teachers
lunch.
find
that
where we
aren't
work.
ready to sign off.
That's the way we.
Virtual work day is the way some counties have called it.
Do it at my pool.
So I didn't like it that it's hanging, but that is the one wonky thing about the calendar.
Yes, that's the only thing that, few of the things that we've heard and said that it's kind of silly having the one day here and, you know.
And it'll be the
but,
one thing that
uh,
4,000 teachers hone in on and complain about.
Of course, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah, because we probably won't make them.
And a date following, Monday, how do we look in the week of the 20th?
Talk about a Wednesday?
Sure, we always usually start with Wednesday.
22nd?
What day?
22nd?
Wednesday the 22nd, I'm open.
I'm open.
I'm open.
All right, let's
As
do
far
it.
as I
And
know.
we owe y'all's place, so we're coming
Okay.
to your house. So we've had,
Bring snacks.
what's that?
Bring snacks
There
and
you go.
drinks.
You better bring snacks.
Oh.
Y'all do better snacks than we do.
Yeah, that's true. 3:30 though, right?
That's because
Wednesday?
rather than Oxford's, we have a donut king next door now.
Yes.
You'll send us the.
So we'll set that
This will be
date,
afternoon,
Wednesday, 22nd, what time? 3:30? All right, are we done?
3:30.
In one way from one?
We could have wine.
We're loud?
We're done?
All right.
It might be
that 3:30 or back.
No, that's still time.
You gotta be on a
I can be there
contract.
sitting, we can just get it ready.
Smell it, right?
Thank you, guys. I know it was a long